So as a keynote speaker, we have Laszlo. Chris, please come with us.
Thank you.
And you can move on to the podium directly. Chris is one of the originators of the concept of sustainable value. So I think we could not have been a better keynote speaker, because he's been arguing that he has reframed sustainability as a business opportunity, actually, and a source of competitive advantage and innovation. So we're going to hear from Chris. Chris has been writing a lot on these issues, a particular book that is called Flourishing Enterprise, and other books. And he's also the co-founder and managing partner of Sustainable Value Partners, which provides advisory services to senior leaders in some of the world's largest companies. So, Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. Good morning, all. I realize I stand between you and the coffee break, so I better make this inspirational. So this first day is about exploring the role of business in creating human well-being. And yet we know that business leaders are deeply skeptical of this agenda. Business leaders, by and large, struggle with the business case for it, and they are typically defensive as well about its moral arguments. So what I want to propose as a way of opening here is 3 different ways for us to think about engaging the business sector in this new role, this new agenda of business as an active partner of government and policymakers in contributing to well-being. A lot of this work that I want to share with you does come from the Leading for Well-Being Consortium, which was already raised early this morning. And in particular, I would like to thank Michael Pearson and Hunter Lovins, Andrew Winston, who was not able to be with us, Ruamina as well, and many others who have participated in the Leading for Well-Being Consortium. So some of what you will see here is also based on reflections and work from this Leading for Well-Being initiative. Okay? By the way, this building here that you see on this first slide, this is my business school where I work. So we try to combine design and sustainability, but it looks better than it actually works, but that's a different story. So let's start with the business case. Peter Drucker, who was widely considered the most influential management thinker and practitioner of the 20th century, said over 20 years ago, every single social and global issue of our day is a business opportunity in disguise. So while other business people in the 80s and 90s were seeing environmental and social and well-being issues as constraints to business or a cost to business, Peter Drucker was saying, if you know how to do it right, it's a business opportunity. So this was in the 1990s. And of course, as you know, since then, there have been a large number of economic, or I should say econometric studies, that are able to demonstrate his point. And let me just share, this is just one among many that you see here. This is a study by 3 Harvard University researchers that looked at 180 companies over 18 years. And they grouped these companies into high sustainability performers and low sustainability performers. On this graph, you can see that if you had invested €1 or $1 in 1992 in the high sustainability performers, you would have gotten $23 out in 2010, 18 years later. If you had invested that dollar in the low sustainability performers, you would have only gotten $15 out. And again, this was a very rigorously done econometric study that I think all of the academics that looked at this said, that it meets the standards necessary to really be a compelling finding. Since then, we've seen many other pieces of evidence about this, and I think Hunter, in fact, is going to speak a little bit more about this, how high impact and social impact investing is a growing area, and that the returns to impact investing are also high. Here, this was published in the Wall Street Journal last year, 2016, and it shows that a socially responsible investment, mutual funds outperform non-socially responsible investment, no matter what the year. So this is a much better representation than just one study of a group of companies, because it's really looking at portfolios of funds. Oxford University recently released an analysis of 200 studies. So this was a meta-analysis, and according to their analysis, 88% of the studies showed that solid environmental, social, and governance practices result in better operational performance. So the thing is this, the thing that we now know that we didn't know 10 or 15 years ago is that there is a way to pay attention to environmental, social, governance performance that leads to better financial results, but you have to know how to do it. And in particularly one point has become very clear, and that's the concept of materiality of issues. Now, a materially important issue is one that can affect the company and that the stakeholders care about. An immaterial issue is one that doesn't particularly influence the outcomes of the company, doesn't really help or hurt the company, and the stakeholders don't really care about it. Now, 20, 30 years ago, when companies were just starting, they would try to pay attention to everything. Now, companies, particularly with the help of standards organizations like the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB, in the United States, have developed materiality indices by sector that help companies understand what is important and what is not important. Now, on this matrix here, you can see materially important issues high-low and performance on immaterial issues high-low. Perhaps not surprising, a company that does everything on sustainability performance outperforms on a risk-adjusted basis. That's what the alpha is. It's the relative outperformance of a stock based on a risk-adjusted benchmark comparison. The outperformance is 2% for a company that does a lot of effort on materially important issues and on immaterial issues. Okay, not surprising. Same thing for companies that pay little attention to sustainability issues, period. They don't care if it's materially important or materially unimportant. They just don't put any attention. Well, they underperform the market by 3%, right? You see that there? Now, perhaps a little more surprising is that companies that pay attention to immaterial issues, in other words, things that don't really care, like an automobile company should be paying attention to, for example, fuel efficiency and water use in its supply chain, materials intensity, whereas an immaterial issue for an automobile company might be something like data disclosure, which is a problem in high-tech companies, but not typically in automobile companies. But even so, companies that pay attention only to immaterial issues, they still outperform. However, the real lesson that I want you to take away from this is that companies that know to pay attention to what is important for them and their stakeholders, and not to put resources on things that are unimportant for them and their stakeholders, outperform on average by 6%, and that's a fairly significant alpha. So we know now, after a good long track record of companies in all industries, at all levels, that sustainability performance, environmental health and social and governance does create business value. Now, when I started 20 years ago, these two bottom ones here of mitigating risk and reducing energy and waste and what are so-called eco-efficiencies were still a big deal. And a lot of companies were very excited to be making efforts in this area. And it frankly, at that time, 20 years ago, it could be a differentiator. Today, do you think it's a differentiator? No. Basically, if your company, and if you are here on behalf of a company, if your company is not already reducing energy and waste and mitigating environmental risks and limiting environmental liabilities, environmental social, it's just not doing good operating practice. It's become part of basic good operating practice. Much more exciting in terms of value creation are these other levels. So how can companies redesign their products so that their products are differentiated with environmental, health, and social attributes? But again, the key here is to do it without trade-off. That's why you see innovation is driving all this. It's not a question of adding something that's green or socially responsible to an existing product. It's a question of rethinking the product design or the business model so that you can come up with a product that is just as good on price, just as good in performance, just as good in aesthetics, but it also has an environmental or social advantage for the consumer. Entering new markets. I mean, we heard already this morning the large number of global and local problems that the world faces. These are market opportunities. These are business opportunities for companies that know how to come up with the right solutions. And of course, we know that they inspire people and reputation. We already heard that. And finally, there's an opportunity for companies to try to influence industry standards, not by reducing the regulation standard of environmental and social performance, but by increasing it so that they can meet that new higher standard and their competitors can't. Now, the problem is that with all these wonderful efforts I just described, as Michael Pearson described, and I apologize, we kind of have a slightly overlapping slides here, but it reinforces the point. We didn't plan the coordination. I think his was a little less violent than mine. But the point is that we know with all the sustainability efforts that have taken place in the aggregate that work today does not contribute to well-being in the workplace. Okay? There are very strong survey statistics to show this. So first of all, there's a Mercer and a Gallup poll, a survey that takes place every year, and this is what it shows year after year in the United States. 52% of American employees self-identify as disengaged at work. 52%. And then another 18% self-identify as actively disengaged. I've always tried to figure out what the heck does that mean? You know, do they go to work and sabotage the organization? Or so it's a real problem. The Wall Street Journal estimated that this level of disengagement of the workforce due to a lack of well-being costs the United States $450 to $550 billion a year. It's a huge deal. And this issue about work and the workplace not contributing to well-being is not just a OECD phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. And it affects, of course, OECD players, business players, because it is saturating our global supply chains. So that's on the social well-being. In terms of environmental well-being, it's the same thing. We keep hearing from companies, oh, we are reducing our CO2 emissions by 10% in the next 5 years. We're reducing our fossil fuel use. But in the aggregate, do you think that the use of fossil fuels is going down or up? Do you think that atmospheric carbon is going down or up in the last 5 years? It's going up. Okay, so in absolute terms, I mean, when I started in this area 20 years ago, we still were around, Hunter, what was it, 280 parts per million?
No, 280 was the pre-industrial. 20 years ago?
300, maybe.
Yeah, 350.
20 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, in any case, we are now over 400.
408.
Okay, 408.
We're probably durably above 400,
Yeah.
which puts us in risk.
Right, which puts us in risk, exactly.
Serious risk.
Right. But I mean, the idea that we would have been one day over 400 when I started 20 years ago was unbelievable. I mean, right, exactly. So the problem is that business is still taking us in the wrong direction. See, so I want you to understand one thing. If there's one key message that I could share with you this morning, it's that, please understand this, that all business efforts to create well-being and to be more environmentally and socially sustainable all they're doing, this is the bad direction, this is the good direction, okay? What they're doing is they're going in the bad direction, but they're slowing down the rate. That's what's actually happening. What we need to do is turn business as an institution around and start getting them heading in the right direction. Same thing with biodiversity loss, nitrogen cycle. All of these trends are getting worse and are exceeding what are called the planetary boundaries. And despite alternative facts in certain parts of the world, we know this is likely to lead to serious problems. So why do we have this situation? Because primarily business efforts to be sustainable are about doing less harm. In spite of what, if you do a content analysis of what companies say they're doing, it's about reducing, avoiding, minimizing, preventing, which only gets you down to zero at best. So I want to propose to you a completely different paradigm of business as an institution that is designed to create well-being. And this is it. In this new paradigm, business must create prosperity for all, not just the top 1%. It should contribute to a healthy, regenerative environment instead of only doing less harm to the environment. And it should be designed to improve human well-being. And if business does this, then guess what? It starts moving in this direction. So I want to show you one example. We've talked about this, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is one business school effort. It's at my university, Case Western, but it's one of many that makes an effort to try to identify examples of these kind of companies headed in this direction. Okay, so the way it works is we've now created a platform and reached out to schools all around the world. In fact, there are several here in France that have contributed to this platform to find examples of businesses that are creating prosperity, contributing to a healthy environment, and improving human well-being. And the first line of measurement is, does it contribute to the SDG? It's not a sufficient standard, but it's the first screening factors that you have to be able to demonstrate it. Here are the selection criteria that we use. The innovation is in a for-profit business. It helps achieve one or more of the UN Development Goals. It has to be scalable or replicable. It has to be contextually appropriate and culturally sensitive. I was going to say that's remarkable coming out of an American institution, but that's, sorry. It has to demonstrate positive impact, and it has to be socially inclusive and have the potential to transform. Now, we have received hundreds and hundreds of stories from students around the world. And each story, the student interviews, the professor assigns the class this assignment. The students have to find a company or an innovation, and then they interview that business leader involved in that innovation for good. And in the process of the interview, they collect information, they write up a story, and they put it on this Aim to Flourish platform. If you're interested, by the way, it's aim2, the number 2, flourish.com. And you can see there are now 422 stories that have passed 2 rounds of Story Steward evaluation. So the story stewards are there to make sure that the stories actually meet these selection criteria. So yes, we have 422 stories published, 607 students, 42 professors, 37 universities, 49 countries impacted. And I have the details also for France. There, as I said, there are a number of stories that have come out of here, particularly at the, there are four business schools in France that have contributed to it. Here are some quick examples. The lucky iron fish is one that students identified in Cambodia. What this is there's a problem of iron deficiency in this country that's quite severe. And the symbol of the fish is good luck in this culture. So they came up with this idea of a cast iron fish that is used for cooking. So they sell this to a household. The household puts it into the cooking pot, And it has led to 50% reductions in anemia rates, as you can see, 90% daily iron intake, and this little fish lasts for 5 years. It's a for-profit business, and it has made a huge difference in the lives of these people. Again, I'll say it again, it's a for-profit business. And what I like about this is that this is an example of a business that has found a relatively low technology way, simple way, to address an important well-being problem in one part of the world, and to come up with a business that makes it effective, both for the business and for society. This Empower light has very inexpensive solar cells that light up an LED light that then lasts for 5 hours. You can compress it, so it's easy to ship. And it's, as you can see, it's shipped to 400 NGO clients. It's led to over 2 million people's lives being impacted. Again, for profit, making a big difference. All of these are developing country. I'll give you just one more, and I'm coming close to finishing up my talk. Coffee soon. So this one is in the developed world. This one is in Canada. Vancouver City Savings Credit Union. It has certain aspects a little similar to Triodos Bank, the way Triodos Bank operates in Europe, and also the New Resource Bank in the United States. But basically, this is a bank that is set up to serve the well-being of the community. And as you see, this is from their website, Redefining Wealth for Your Well-Being and Your Community. Everything from paying a living wage to only lending to organizations that are doing things that are good for society and the environment, to sharing profits with the community. It's through and through a banking organization that is designed to create well-being. So all of these stories, why are they so powerful? Because it changes how the students and the business leaders think. It changes what they want to do, and most importantly, it changes who they're being. And it's in this last sentence, who they are being, that I want to suggest to you is perhaps one of the critical approaches that we have not spent enough time looking at when we try to engage business people. Why? Because we only engage people analytically, left brain, neocortex, okay? Or we engage people on the moral argument. But changing who leaders are being comes from having them experience the world differently. When they're being interviewed by a student and asked, why did you do this? And they're being celebrated for this. There's something that happens to a business leader, something that happens to the students that are involved in this kind of exercise that makes them feel much more committed and connected to the world. Or at least that's been our experience. So, in conclusion, really, I want to suggest that if we want to be successful in engaging the business sector in creating well-being, we need 3 approaches. The first approach is the business case, and the metrics are financial. We know this. We've been doing this for a long time. It's really quite sophisticated in how it's done. The second case is the moral case, and I think we've also tried that for a long time. This is about values. Ethical values, about things about, caring for others, respecting others, telling the truth, that sort of thing. But we also know that, frankly, the business community is not very open to being told externally that they need to improve their moral behavior. It's like telling a kid, eat your vegetables. Not always very successful doing that. So, what do we need? We need a new narrative. And that is what this Leading for Wellbeing initiative is about. It's a very clever way to take the development of a narrative in the 20th century that led to what is called neoliberalism, which was about the primacy of shareholder value, small government, that competition and consumerism are the essential qualities of what it means to be human, that externalities are acceptable, and instead it's shifting, it's transforming that narrative to an entirely new story about what it means to be human. as caring and compassionate and looking for freedom and dignity based on the freedom and dignity of all to create shared well-being on a small planet. It's time for this new narrative. And it's not a moral case, it's not a financial case. It can be very practical, but we need to start propagating a new story about who we are and the nature of the world we live in as fundamentally interconnected, and that human beings are fundamentally caring, compassionate, bonding species. So I also want to finish with just just to share with you an event, because we have a series of these, just like this is one in the Leading for Wellbeing event. There's another one in Colorado. I would invite you to find out from Hunter about that one. It's going to be in May.
15 to 17.
May 15th to 17th. And there is one that my university is doing in Cleveland. I want to invite any of you who are interested to come to that one as a continuation of these conversations. And also, I've talked about it with the organizers there. We have the interest to offer this 25% promo code for OECD participants who would come there. It's going to be focused very much on all the questions I just covered. So with that, I thank you, and bon continuation.